Okay, I think we're ready to start, everybody. So let's just see here. Mark's online. We have confirmation of a quorum. So I'll call the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, July 19th, 2023 to order. We will acknowledge that we're located on the traditional territory of the Latchpatach people. And the first item of business is adoption of the public agenda.
Move adoption.
Second.
Any discussion? Anything to add? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. No petitions or delegations. Adoption of the previous minutes of June 14th. Need a motion for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Any business arising from anybody? No, public considerations, none. No chairs reports, staff reports. Number one, request for subdivision frontage relief for receipt.
I'll move receipt.
Need a seconder?
I'll second.
Discussion, anyone?
Is it working? There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The SRD has received a subdivision referral to split a 2.16 hectare, 5.3 acre strata lot on Quadra Island into two strata lots, and the Form E approval from the corporation has been obtained. The parcel is zoned residential 1, and it's naturally divided into two portions by a rocky bluff that extends along the proposed subdivision boundary. And the intent of the subdivision is to create two lots, each approximately 1 hectare in size. And as proposed lot B does not comply with 10% frontage requirement as specified by bylaw 64, frontage relief for this subdivision application is required, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone? Any directors? Director Mawhinney.
Thank you. I do have a few questions just because I'm, learning things, and this seems like a good opportunity to ask a few questions. So I was hoping that staff could speak to the appropriateness of the subdivision for the zoning, because there is a line in the report that says that strata subdivisions allowing smaller lot sizes. As well, I'm curious about the application. It has 40% of the required 10% frontage. What is the frontage percentage that planners would recommend not going under, because this seems like you're recommending that it go forward? So I'm curious about that. And also the report mentions 20 meters of width. What does this number represent? Is it like an urban planning number, or where does it come from?
Mr. Chairman, this application is coming forward because these lots don't make the 10% frontage requirement. And when that situation occurs, the board has to give approval to go below that 10%. So that's basically because of the configuration of these parcels. It's the 10% frontage is cannot be obtained. Pardon me. In respect to the subdivision proposal. And the way that the Local Government Act is worded requires that the board give approval for any subdivisions where frontage on a highway is less than 10%. I don't know if that answers your question at all. No.
Through the chair to the director, the line in the report that speaks to smaller lot sizes for stratas is just in general terms. Strata subdivisions typically allow for smaller lot sizes, narrow roads, and other lesser requirements than typical non-strata subdivisions. The lot sizes adhere to the required lot size of the bylaw. So there's no issue with the subdivision other than it doesn't meet the 20% or the 10% lot frontage. there is no hard, fast number as to what someone should go below or above. A lot of this is dictated by the size of the parcel. So the Local Government Act doesn't necessarily take into consideration larger lots, lots that are configured due to terrain constraints and those sorts of things. They're typically just to ensure that there's enough access for the lot, so that the use of the parcel is appropriate enough that the access can be easily attained. So 20 meters is sufficient to allow vehicle access, enough width between the vehicle access and the neighboring parcel, those sorts of things. So there's nothing that we would say that we wouldn't necessarily go under. It would really depend on the parcel itself on a case-by-case basis. So what impacts that frontage may have on neighboring parcels, on neighboring land uses, those sorts of things. So it really is just case by case. In this case, there's a bluff here that is restricting how wide the frontage can be. And so they've adjusted it as much as they can to take into account the bluff and where the lot lines can be located to allow the lot to be subdivided into two. I don't know if that answered all your questions either, but.
No, it did. It did. May I have another question?
You may.
Chair, thank you. So in the Reveille application, which we'll be looking at in a few minutes, the staff report mentions that subdivisions should be, quote, an average width to depth ratio of 1:3 on irregular shaped lots. However, that report is in regards to a lot which requires double frontage, water and road. Is the same average ratio required on non-waterfront irregular shaped lots? And my eyes can't assess whether this ratio is occurring on proposed lot 2. Has it been calculated, and is this proposed lot within these parameters?
Is this the Reveille application? No, this is still Baker. You've got proposed lots.
Turn on your mic there, John.
Oh, pardon me. We have proposed lots A and B in this application. Both of them meet the minimum area requirements. Sorry, could you repeat the question again, Director? Pardon me.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So the Reveille application, and why I mentioned it is because it talks about irregular shaped lots requiring an average 1:3 ratio. But I wasn't sure if that was for lots which required double frontage, like road and water, which the Reveille application has, or if it's the same average width to depth ratio of 1:3 is required on non-waterfront irregular shaped lots as well. And if in fact that is true, with proposed lot 2, has this been calculated, and is the proposed lot within these parameters?
Okay.
Proposed lot 2 is not this application, those were really, it's getting confusing.
Yeah, we have proposed strata lots A and B in this application, so, regardless, I'm looking here at the requirements under the Quad Island zoning bylaw, and the 1:3 ratio is only respecting lots with water access. So it doesn't apply to lots which don't have water access.
Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
was what I was wondering. And so there is no concern with ratios when they're irregular shaped and they're non-waterfront?
It would appear not according to the bylaw anyway. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? Seeing none on receipt, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And do we have a recommendation? Director Mawhinney?
I will move B, that the committee recommend that with reference to section 512(2) of the Local Government Act, the board approve frontage relief for proposed lot B as shown on the plan of subdivision attached to the staff report dated July 19th, 2023.
Second.
Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? No one's opposed, that's carried. Number 2. This electoral area D, request for subdivision frontage relief, Henrich, and for receipt. Do we have a motion?
Move receipt.
Seconded.
And seconded by alternate director Brown.
John will speak this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An application has been received to split a 2.86 hectares. Thank you. An application has been received to split a 2.86 hectare or 7-acre parcel in Stories Beach into 2 lots. The parcels are already naturally divided into 2 portions by Woods Creek, which flows across the property within a Crown Land corridor. The intent of the subdivision is to separate the 2 portions, Lot A being 1.28 hectares in size, and leaving a remainder of approximately 1.58 hectares. And the Castle Drive Road right-of-way will be extended east and south to provide access and road frontage to both parcels. And although the proposed Lot A does not comply with frontage requirements, the frontage provided offers sufficient area for access purposes. It is suggested that, given that the parcel is already severed by Woods Creek, this relief request is supportable. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? Yes.
Thank you for the
Brown.
report.
Alternate director Brown.
Thank you for the report, and I will be supporting the recommendations from the planning department on this motion.
All righty, anything further? See none on receipt then, all in favor? Anyone opposed? None, that's carried. And a recommendation, do you have a recommendation, Director Brown?
Yes, I do, and I will also move the recommendations.
Just read it out there.
Where are they here?
Have you got it in front of you?
No. Pardon me? Sorry.
It's on the screen there, or I can read it for you if you want.
Can you read it for me? I'm just trying to get my bearings here.
I'll read it. No, I can't read it. I guess I could read it. That the committee recommend that with reference to section 512, part 2 of the Local Government Act, the board approved frontage relief for proposed lot B as shown on the plan of subdivision attached to staff report dated July 19, 2023. Need a motion?
Motion to accept.
So moved.
So moved.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Discussion? See none, all those in favor? None's opposed, that's carried. Number 3, request for subdivision frontage relief, Reveille on Quadra for receipt. Motion.
Move receipt.
Second.
John will speak this as well.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If Director Brown could turn your mic off just when you're not using it so the cameras work for me, that'd be great.
The SRD has received a subdivision referral to split a 6.1 hectare parcel on Quadra Island into 2 lots. The parcel is naturally divided by a bench that separates into an upper and lower beachfront area, and each of proposed lots is approximately 3 hectares in size, one parcel being in the upper area and one in the lower beachfront area. And although proposed Lot 1 does not comply with the highway frontage requirements, the frontage provided is more than 40 metres in width, providing more than sufficient area for access purposes. It is suggested that, given terrain constraints of the property and the parcel being naturally split by the bench, creating an upper and lower portion, this application is supportable. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, John. Anything further? Director Maloney?
Thank you, Chair. I have one question, and that was that I noticed there's an easement on the map, and I was curious how the easement works. Is there SRD involvement in that, or is it strictly between the 2 property or potential 2 property owners?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This easement would be implemented as part of the subdivision with Ministry of Transportation. It wouldn't involve us. It would be between the 2 property owners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further? Call the question on receipt. All those in favor? None's opposed. That's carried. Do we have a recommendation? Director Maloney?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move B, that the committee recommend that with reference to section 512, part 2 of the Local Government Act, the board approve frontage relief for proposed Lot B as shown on the plan of subdivision attached to the staff report dated July 19th, 2023.
Do we have a seconder?
Second it.
Seconded.
All right. Further discussion? See none, all those in favor? No one's opposed, that's carried. Number 4, OCP rezoning First Nations consultation, Area D, for receipt.
So moved.
Second.
And John will speak to this as well.
Thank you, John.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I'm on a run this morning, Mr. Chairman. Excellent microphone. An official OCP and rezoning application has been received which proposes to redesignate and rezone a 2-hectare, 4.94 acre parcel on Vaughan Road into 4 lots, to facilitate a 4-lot subdivision of property. Proposed lot 1 would be 0.8 acres in size, and the remaining country residential lots 2 to 4 ranging in size from 1.2 to 1.7 acres. Proposed lots 1 and 2 are already developed, each with 1 single-family dwelling, and currently both dwellings share a septic field located on the west side of proposed lot 1. A separate septic field would be installed on each of the proposed lots 2 to 4. And prior to the circulation of this proposal to the First Nations and government agencies, board approval must first be obtained. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yeah. Anything further from directors? Seeing none, I'll call a question on receipt. All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. And recommendation. Do we have a recommendation here? For Director Brown.
I move all the
We'll
recommendations.
do one at a time. Do B first.
Recommend, where is it here?
Can you see it?
Yep. Recommend that the committee recommend the First Nations consultation process outlined in the staff report dated July 19th, 2023 for application CP2D 23/RZZ2D 23 honing be approved.
You have a seconder?
Second.
Second that.
Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none. On the recommendation, all those in favor? No one's opposed, that's carried. And recommendation C.
Recommend that this committee recommend the agency referral list as outlined in the staff report dated July 19th, 2023 for application CP2D 23/RZ2D 23 honing be approved.
Second that.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? No one's opposed, that's carried. Number 5. Proposal for dog control service for Cortez Island for receipt.
Move receipt.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'll just quickly speak to this if I can. So we have over the years examined dog control on Quadra many, many times. And I'm going to say the most challenging part of it was that the director at the time wanted control. I'm maybe using the wrong terms, but seize dogs, have somewhere to put them, have a company on call to come and get them. And that was really the expensive part of dog control. What the RCMP had wanted us in conjunction with this in the community was that they would enforce the bylaw. So that was the easy part. So they wanted us to have a bylaw in place so that it was a dog control issue. Folks could phone the RCMP and the RCMP could deal with it. And we were all happy with that. And that's quite an easy service to establish. And it hit the wall at the cost of, again, the seizure and having a reserve spot in the pound and having a company on call to respond to calls. So if the area director wants, in case I wasn't clear in it, if the area director wants a dog control service on Cortez, it can be quite simple. It's simply creating a regulatory bylaw for it that states whatever the director would like, and with the intention of just having the RCMP enforce that. If you want or looking, which I don't think you are, but if you're looking at anything else, the cost can become significant. So quite simple regulatory bylaw. If that's what you want, you can see in the report, costs are quite minimal. And if you want something more, then it's, I would say, more significant costs. Thank you.
Director Bonesh, anything to say on this?
Yeah, just thanks to the staff for this report. I will be recommending option B, and the key thing for me is that we're doing something that's appropriate for Cortez. And as the CAO mentioned, I'm not looking for something with the seizure part of it, and I'm happy for the RCMP to enforce.
I think that would be A then, from the sounds of it.
Sorry, A. Yes. Thank you.
Director Mawhinney?
Thank you, Chair. I also, on Quadra, am curious about this proposal, and I'm curious what the RCMP exactly does if they don't seize dogs and put them in a pound somewhere. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm going to speak to my exchanges with the RCMP. I'm not going to quote the law or what they can do, but certainly on Quadra, the easy thing was they wanted something to enforce. Again, don't quote me, but they would say like the criminal code doesn't, allow us to, we don't have laws about, barking dogs and noise like that. That becomes under local government legislation. But they needed and wanted something to enforce on our behalf, and they can be delegated that authority to enforce our local bylaws. So whether it be, it would depend on what that bylaw read. If they have, let's say, an obligation under the laws of this country, if there was a vicious dog that was attacking people and doing harm, they would, of course, move in and do something, seize the dog and take it to wherever their holding, area was. Beyond that kind of level about noise and, maybe dogs eating chickens or whatever they're doing, that would fall under a local bylaw, and they would be happy to enforce that. That was the simplest thing to do. And we didn't get there on Quadra because there was this issue about wanting to have seizure and control, and that added significantly to the cost of it. So if you're interested in something similar, there was always a path to just that. And from my personal account, I can speak to talking to the RCMP. I don't know if that individual constable is still there, but they were happy to enforce that for us. But we never got to just that level. And so it kind of died on the vine.
Put it in the question.
Just one moment, Director Vanessa. Did Director Mawhinney have a follow-up there?
I did, and I'm just still not clear on what the police actually do. Like, do they have their own holding cell? Or like, what if there's like a dog that's been found chasing deer or eating a deer and it's in the ditch? Like, what can they do with a bylaw that doesn't have any
I think they have a
collection of a
means.
dog?
So, our bylaw would likely not speak to collection, because if a dog is violent enough that it's hurting other animals or people, the RCMP have means to seize that, and they have facilities. I'm not going to say specific to the dog, but facilities to hold it. I know they have held dogs before that are vicious. But we wouldn't create, in theory, a bylaw that would have seizure. It would be for the police, let's say, the barking dog, the dog was just barking all day, and they would go and make notice or write a ticket to the homeowner. But our bylaw presumably wouldn't address the seizure, because if it did, then we got to make that accommodation for it. So we would write the bylaw in terms of the things that we had issues were that didn't include seizure. And if there was necessary seizure, that would go above and beyond, and the RCMP would enforce that outside of what we were wanting. Again, the dog's doing violent acts, they're going to go get that dog, right away, and they'll seize it. They'll do whatever they do with it. But our bylaw wouldn't have to address that.
Okay, Director Vanessa, did you have something there?
Yeah, just wanted to follow up with on Robin's question on what the process would look like. So this request for a bylaw came out of a situation where a dog was out of control over multiple times, scaring people, and ultimately ended up killing another dog on the island. And the dog owners did approach the RCMP and say, "Look, this happened. This dog killed our dog." And the RCMP told them that they weren't able to do anything about it because there was no bylaw. So just looking for clarification. Let's just say we have a dog that's out of control. It's scaring children. It's shown aggression and potential violence to other dogs. I heard you mention the word ticket, so the RCMP can come in and give them a ticket. Is that the sort of the penalty that this will ultimately produce?
We may look at introducing that. We can bring a draft bylaw and talk about what we want in there, but it's really about the RCMP enforcing something. Now, again, let's look at the next level. I don't know if this all happened after the fact, right? So let's say this dog was terrorizing other dogs and it ended up killing one, and the RCMP are like, after the fact, what are we supposed to do? There's no bylaw in fact. But let's say there was a rabid dog out there currently terrorizing folks, and the RCMP felt that there was an imminent cause of harm that was going to happen. They would act on that. So I think the important thing for us is we want an animal control bylaw out there that our intention is the RCMP are going to enforce, and it's not our intention to do seizures and hold them. And it gets ugly too with that. When you start holding people's dogs, and at first it's cost, and then there's, the people want the dog back, and there's a process to do with that. So I don't believe we want to get into that, but we do want to have a regulatory bylaw. Whatever that says, we can have discussion. We can bring other bylaws forward that other communities are doing, whether it involves ticketing as well, and see what the appetite for it is. And I'm just saying, I don't think we want to go to have an on-call group and have a reserve spot in the pound and all that kind of stuff. It gets very expensive.
Thank you. Mr. Yates has a comment here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to be clear, option A in the staff report refers to the fact that currently Cortes Island does not have the authority to get into the business of dog control. So the first step would be to establish a service. And once that is established, then the board could look at what kind of regulations and who's going to enforce it and whether there's cost to public or not, and all these kinds of issues that would be relevant to the actual control of dogs. That would be the second step in the process. So just for clear.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. And Mark, staff would bring back a draft eventually that you could look at and the board would look at, and you can amend it or approve it or whatever you like.
Great. I'm ready to move option A.
Okay, anything further on receipt? Call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. And do you have a recommendation, Director Vinesh?
I'd like to move option A, that a further report and bylaw be prepared to establish a dog control service for electoral area B.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. Number 6, BC Hydro LED Streetlight Replacement Program update for receipt.
Move receipt.
Seconder, please. By Director Vinesh.
I
Discussion?
don't think there's anything for staff to add, but happy to ask questions,
Okay,
answer
Director
questions.
Mawhinney.
Thank you. And thank you for this update. I'm really curious if maybe the engineers know what the flat rate per light is and possibly the average annual percentage increase on the fees.
Thank you. Through the chair to the director, I was able to obtain a copy of the recent invoice. The fee per light varies depending on the wattage and type of light. So as noted in the report, there are still 2 high-pressure sodium lamps, one in area D, one in area C. Those are $19.87 per lamp. Then it increases depending on the LED light, as I said, depending on wattage. 51 watts and below is $15.47. 51 watts to 80 watts is $19.27. 81 watts to 120 watts is $24.12, and anything over 120 watts is $28.29. Each light also carries a supplemental fee of $2.06. The charges, I'd have to double check that. I believe they were 2% a year. I don't know if the CFO recalls or has it off the top of his head, but I can definitely follow up with you on that.
Thank you very much.
All right, on receipt. All those in favor? And none opposed, that's carried. Anything further on that, anyone? No recommendations? All righty. Number 7, roadside parking of vehicles in electoral areas for receipt.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
Second.
And Aniko can speak to this.
Thank you. Through the chair to the directors. This report is brought forward at the request of the Electoral Area C Director for information with respect to roadside parking of both commercial vehicles and non-commercial vehicles. The report explains the jurisdiction being with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and the enforcement of roadside parking for both commercial and non-commercial vehicles through either CVSE or the RCMP. If the regional district has concerns with respect to roadside parking in electoral areas, it would be recommended that they put these concerns to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and they would determine the most appropriate means of enforcement. Thank you.
Director Maloney?
Thank you, Chair. The report did not mention what the acronym CVSE stands for. Could you tell me that? And I'll ask the rest of my questions after.
What was the last? Commercial vehicle service?
I can help if you want.
Commercial vehicle services, I forget the last.
Commercial vehicle safety and enforcement.
Safety and enforcement, thank you. That's why we should always spell it out.
Thank you. Yeah, that wasn't clear. I thank you for the report, but it doesn't really dig into the crux of my concern. I've met with Modi staff, and one way that they manage roadside parking is by checking to see if a vehicle has valid insurance. And recently, ICBC has stopped issuing stickers, so there are no date stickers, so there's no longer a way for Modi to decipher whether or not the vehicle of concern is insured and legally permitted to be there or not. Oh, you're shaking your head at me.
Yeah, that's actually not true. They do have a means. There's a system that they can tap into to determine whether or not the vehicle has insurance, as far as that we know, and who the current owner is. So, or they can use the RCMP to do that for them, because the RCMP can actually scan them and right away know.
Okay. So, I guess my follow-up question would be, is the RCMP or the CVSE, Commercial Vehicle Safety and Enforcement, are these the agencies which need to be called if there is a roadside parking concern? And, or like, where do constituents take their concerns?
Yeah, it would be our recommendation to connect with Modi, and Modi would determine the best case of enforcement. I don't know their internal process. If we were to get a complaint, we would refer it off to Modi. If it's one of if it's a commercial vehicle and there's a safety issue, you could try to reach out to CVSE. They are contracted to do those sorts of services. But without knowing the exact issue with respect to the vehicle, I would say the best case would be just to contact Modi, and they would determine who they could call to address the issue.
Thank you. And I wasn't going to say this now, but, I have definitely been having challenges with conversations with Modi. They are not prone to replying to emails. So it is quite challenging to get any sort of response on any sort of thing at all. And I'm wondering if there would be an interest from my fellow directors to invite Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure staff to an Electoral Area Services Committee meeting so that we could maybe meet face-to-face and get some answers to some of the questions that we're curious about.
We can always make that motion after if you wish. Anything further on receipt? Call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? That's carried. Do you have a motion, Director Maloney?
Well, I didn't, but now I do. I would like to move that the Electoral Area Services Committee invite Brendan Kelly and his colleagues from the Ministry of
I
Transportation.
wouldn't
Oh,
be
don't
specific
name.
about
Okay.
names.
Okay, don't be specific about names. Shh. We invite Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure staff to an Electoral Area Services Committee meeting so we can discuss ongoing issues within the electoral areas.
I second that.
All right, we got that in? Yep, I got it. All right, thank you. All right, anything further? Call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous, so that's carried. Financial assistance for Quadra Island Recreation Society for receipt.
Move receipt.
Somebody like second that?
Second.
Discussion? Director Malini?
Thank you for the report. In the report, it states that the Quadra Recreation Society may not be eligible for grant and aid funding because it conflicts with augmentation of publicly funded services. How has this been handled in the past? As I was told by the executive director of the Quadra Community Center, that this is a long-standing tradition with the previous director, support for this Halloween event. So that's question one. And then what would be preferable, that this amount is included in the community center budget, which is presented in early spring?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'll answer the second one, and Mr. Yates can answer the first one. Yeah, I find it quite puzzling that grants and aid from the Quadra Rec Center are submitted here. I would suggest just include it in their annual budget. It's quite puzzling to me. So yes, I don't know why they complete a budget, submit it to us, it's approved, and then they ask for grants and aid. I don't know why that happens. Off my memory, it's not a long-standing tradition, but maybe Tom knows different.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not recall ever the board providing a grant and aid to the Quadra Island Recreation Association. It may have happened. It certainly does not come to mind from my perspective.
So here's something you can't do that we refer to in the report. I'll just say Area D water. So we have Area D water. It's a service. It's funded by the taxpayer to offer a grant and aid to Area D water. It's funded. So it seems a little bit odd that we're funding the rec center and then they're asking for a grant and aid. That's quite unusual.
Good, go ahead, Director.
Well, that is interesting. Would it be possible to defer this until the next meeting so that I can look into that information a little
Yeah,
better?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're on receipt then? Do you want to defer the receipt of this? Is that what you're saying?
Is that what I'm trying to say? I don't know. I just want to bring it back to the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I think the motion on the floor is to receive. If there's a subsequent to defer, that would be appropriate as well.
To defer the motion that we're currently on
To defer the matter for further discussion at the
as a
next meeting.
subsequent.
Yeah.
Fine. Thank you.
Mark Benesh.
Oh, Mark, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a note to Director Mahini. It sounds like we can approve this grant and aid right now. It sounds like it's unusual. It's not the ideal way of doing it, but we could approve it this year, and then I think next year recommending that the rec center increase their tax requisition to include that, rather than going through grant and aid in 2024.
All right. Do you have a comment, Director?
I guess it's maybe a question for our financial officer. If we were to defer this to the August meeting, would it still, and discuss it there, would it still be able to be processed in time
Yes.
for Halloween?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right, let's call a question on receipt. All those in favor? And none opposed, that's carried. And you have subsequent, Director Malini.
Could we please defer this item to the next August Electoral Area Services Committee meeting?
Anyone want to
I'll
second
second
that? Director Benesh seconded it. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, we're on to bylaws. Number 484, noise control electoral area A for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second by Director Benesh. Okay, now on this one, I have a couple things to say. Very nice, exactly what I wanted, except for 5 little words that we forgot to remove. The original clause 4 says, no person or owner or occupier of real property shall make, cause to be made, or continue to make any noise or sound, including the unauthorized use of bird scare devices and so on. So what I want to happen here is those 5 words, noise or sound, including the, be deleted, and then it would read, so the amended bylaw would read, no person, owner, or occupier of real property shall make, cause to be made, or continue to make any unauthorized use of a bird scare device and so on. Now, do we need a motion to do that, or can staff just change it when it comes back to the board, or what?
I think a motion, you have it there. I think a motion, if they're just the 5 words and they're included in
Yeah.
there, I think a motion to amend the bylaw to
Okay.
delete those 5 words would
Excellent.
be simplest for
So
us.
after receipt, I will step down from chair and make that motion. In the meantime, any further comments from directors? Seeing none, Aniko, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. To the chair, by removing those few small words, the bylaw will likely be challengeable and unenforceable because we can't regulate a specific sound without regulating noise in general terms first. You need that layer. So any jurisdiction that currently has a noise scare device bylaw has a noise control bylaw. We do not have that here. So in order to take this document and have the enforcement officer out there and enforce and ticket, we would need to have that upper layer saying that we do regulate noise. If we don't have that, this is just specifically trying to regulate a use or a sound that is not really able to be regulated. So that's the challenge there with the larger jurisdictions and some of those bylaws that you've seen that are just specific to bird scare devices. It's because they already have that other overarching bylaw in force. So just to clarify.
I understand what you're saying, so that leaves me to 2 options, because the option that is recommended would not work for Sayward. I mean, I would be tarred and feathered instantly. So the only other option is to have no service and rescind it. I just don't have the option to have a noise, general noise prohibition, because it's a noisy community and people like their noise. I mean, we've got lots of noise. What do you recommend?
Well, I think so. I get what you're saying, but I think it's clear what the intent, though, like what Aniko's saying is there's another layer to be able to enforce that
I
bird
understand.
scare. So, and you can see in the bylaw, it defines the bird scare devices. So it's not like, just because that layer is there, the second layer is to talk about the bird scare device. So I personally think we understand what your desire is, and we feel this does. This isn't a blanket then to go out.
Yeah,
and,
no, I know, but you will get blanket complaints. There's always people in the community that,
Yeah.
you know, we have dogs that bark 24 hours a day, and you'll get that instantly.
Right, we'll get the complaints, but we won't do anything with them, if you
Yeah.
will.
I would be crucified nevertheless if this is on paper. Can we accept the fact that it might be challenged and suffer the consequences? Or not?
Mr. Chairman, I think by the sound of it, this is an area where we want to stand back a moment and just consider what's being proposed and how that would affect the bylaw before jumping to a conclusion that may or may not be correct, and whether that requires looking at case law and getting legal assistance is something that I think the Director of Community Services may want to do before providing advice that is black or white on the issue. I think it's worth looking into what you're proposing a little bit deeper and then coming back
All right,
perhaps.
thank you for that.
So how about this, based on the information you've given us in the motion, how about we defer this to a future meeting?
Perfect. Can someone make that motion for me, please?
I'd like to make the motion that we defer this to a future meeting.
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, and that's carried. All right, on to number 2, groundwater extraction, bulk water sales, processing and bottling for receipt.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
Second.
Discussion? Director Mwini?
I would just like to say thank you for the bylaws and that they've happened so quickly. I appreciate it. And if there's no other comments, I would move B.
All right, anything further? On receipt, all those in favor? And that's unanimous, that's carried. And motion, Director Mwini.
I would like to move that the committee recommend that bylaws number 509, 510, and 511 be forwarded to the board for first and second readings, and that the public hearings for bylaws number 509, 510, and 511 be waived in accordance with section 464, 2 of the Local Government Act.
Do we have a seconder?
Seconded.
I'll second that.
All right. Anything further on the motion? All in favor? Unanimous, that's carried. Correspondence, director's reports, resolution status reports for receipt.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
Second.
All right, this is the July 11th, 2023 report from Director Mawhinney.
If I can, just before Director Mawhinney starts, I think this is more appropriate. This is an allocation of staff time that's going to take resources. It's not a deal breaker, but I think this is likely more appropriate to go to the board. This is a board issue to vote on the allocation of staff and their resources. So not certain why you wanted it on the East Committee, but I think it's more appropriate to address the board on this.
Okay, well, if I may, I thought that I was bringing it to East because it was something that I was hoping to happen at East. It's not a proposal to bring it to ask for resolution status reports at the board level. I'm only asking for them to be here at the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting level. And I thought that after we made decisions at the Electoral Area Committee level, they all moved to the board for approval before we voted on them anyway.
They do. So again, it's not a deal breaker. If you can proceed with this, again, if the Electoral Area Services wants resources from staff, yes, it's going to go to the board. I would just appreciate then when it came to the board that you speak to it again. Lots of times motions will just flow through it. And this is using resources that we don't have. And I would also like the opportunity to speak to the board about additional reporting is going to take additional resources, and the board should be made aware of that.
Do you have thoughts that you'd like to share with us now about the additional reporting resources? From the way that I have been looking at other resolution status reports, and specifically the one that I attached to my report, which is from the Comox Valley Regional District, it looks to me like, as a matter of course, all of the resolutions are recorded in a database so that they can really print out a copy of the report. And that's why there's that line at the top of the report that says, meeting type equals committee, EASC, and status contains active, so that came from a spreadsheet of some sort.
Yeah, I realize that. I'm not sure, again, how resources are allocated at CVRD. This is just another reporting. I'll give everyone just some insight. When you get agendas that are published at 4:30, it's because we're done at 4:28 every other Friday. It's just more work, more reporting that requires more resources. I have no idea how many or how much resources the CVRD has, but this is taking more resources that I just don't have. And I think the board needs to be aware of that. That's my opinion on it. But
Would this be something that'd be done by planning staff or someone else?
probably corporate staff. We meet for your information, every Tuesday we have a senior staff meeting and we go through all the resolutions and reports. There's a pile of them and we figure out what we can bring forward. We bring them forward as information comes forward on them, as we fact find, as we do the research, as we have the time, the resources, and then they come forward. So we are doing that as staff every week. So when you see the reports, it's based on a number of factors of why they're on here. So this is just, again, in my mind, more reporting that takes time and resources.
Just as a question, what about just that skeleton list that you have at your staff meeting? Would that be adequate?
Again, it takes time. Everything I know may seem easy. You get these binders and they're full of reports and stuff. It takes time. It takes time and resources. It may not look that difficult, but it's not as easy as just hitting a print button on there.
George Van Esch?
I just want to thank Director Mahoney for bringing this forward. I do hear from the CAO that it is going to take some extra time, but I think it's going to be extremely valuable. Certainly for me, I personally find it stressful and creates a lot of uncertainty for me when I don't know what's coming up and I only find out about things on Friday. And just having a sense of when things are going to land on the agenda is going to help a lot with my discussions with my constituents, and I think it brings a lot of transparency and accountability to the public, which is important. And I also think it's a communication tool that's going to make all of our jobs sitting around the table easier. So thank you, Director Mahoney.
Anything further?
Yeah, I agree with the idea that status reports can be useful, but I have to agree that it's just, we don't direct staff. And I think staff are busy enough now as it is. And I'm concerned that, transparency can be achieved through other means, like public consultations and meetings and, that type thing. So I'm a little bit concerned that this might just be onerous on staff and funding issues. I would support the potential if it was even for every 3 months, potentially, because that would give us, it would be less onerous, but it would also tie in with the EASC and the regional meetings, maybe possibly, might be an option.
All right, we're on receipt still. Anything further? Call the question on receipt. All those in favor? That's carried. Is there a further motion?
There is.
Go ahead, Director
Thank you.
Mahoney.
I would move that we adopt a policy of including resolutions status report in our Electoral Area Services Committee meeting agendas.
I'll second that.
All right, there's a little addition to what you've got on there then, Edith. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen. Okay, that's good. Have you got that?
I do.
Okay, thank you. All right, call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? One opposed, that's carried. Alternate Director Brown is opposed. Okay. And no new business. Addendum items, nothing. Termination.
I'll move termination.
Moved.
Second by
Second.
Director Vanesh. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, everyone. I guess the other option is you could just run through the minutes on a little spreadsheet on